Welcome everyone to our webinar this afternoon. This is going to be an overview of some of the best features in Windows Server. We won't be able to cover everything. We'll talk about some courses that you can choose later on to get more detailed information about specific topics, but we want to give you an overview here in the next hour or so. So we can go ahead and get this out of the way and talk a little bit about what we'll be discussing this afternoon. We picked 4 specific new and upgraded features in Windows Server 2016 for this webinar because we think that these will have the biggest impact on whether people decide to move to Windows Server 2016 or not. And trust me, there are some very good reasons for doing so. So in the next few minutes, we are going to be talking about and showing you how to work with Nano Server. If you haven't heard about it, get used to the name. Pretty much Windows Server 2016 is going to be moving in this direction for a long time to come. And containers, how to run isolated and protected applications on your servers. We'll talk about how to do that. HyperV has been around for quite a while, but Microsoft has made some very good improvements to this version, which pretty much brings it up to speed with a lot of the features available in similar products. And one of my favorite products, PowerShell, that has also been improved as well. And for anybody who manages many different servers and desktops or virtual machines at the same time, the addition of PowerShell Direct to the new environment is going to be a big deal for all of you. And we'll show you how to take advantage of that later on as well. If we have time, we'll be including a demonstration for each of these so you can actually see how they work and thus get the full benefit of our webinar. So who is this webinar for? Well, as I mentioned before, this is going to be an overview. So even if you're not a tech head, if you're not an IT admin or somebody who does direct desktop support, you can still benefit from this. Have you ever wondered, for example, why virtualization and the cloud are such important features in Windows Server 2016? When we talk about that, when we talk about Nano Server in a few minutes, you'll learn a little bit more about that. And we'll also be talking about how a lot of the changes in Windows Server 2016, the improvements, we touched on this before, are for people who will be moving to the cloud. So maybe you have a lot of in-house servers, and you've been hearing a lot of talk about moving to Azure or other cloud products. Why would you want to do so? What are the benefits of doing so? How hard is it to do so? Some of the additions in Windows Server 2016 have been specifically added to make that easier. We have some free course material for you at the end of the webinar. Some material from 50331D, a PowerShell tutorial for those of you who work with that product. And some information about 55069A as well, which we'll discuss in about 30 or 40 minutes or so. All right. But in the meantime, let's dive into our discussion. All right. And we'll start off by talking about Nano Server. Like I said before, if you haven't heard about Nano Server before, this is a big change to the Windows Server environment. Most of us are used to working with a Windows Server desktop. We all know what that looks like, right? The start button, the window button, navigating with a mouse, we're all used to that. And then a few years ago, Microsoft introduced Server Core, all right? They got rid of the GUI, all right? Now you were still able to log in locally to the machine. Go to the machine, log in locally, connect to it remotely, and run resources on it remotely or locally if you needed to. But the GUI was gone, and that was a very big change. Now an even bigger change has been implemented with the introduction of Nano Server. All right, the GUI is gone. Logging in locally, that's gone as well. and even the ability to use remote desktop to connect to the machine remotely, that is totally gone as well. So what are you going to do with this machine? You can't connect to it using remote desktop. You can't log in locally. There's no GUI. What are you going to do with it? Well, this is mostly for individuals and organizations that want a small footprint server for running service applications or services that don't require a lot of user interface. You can still connect to this server remotely, but not with a GUI, but only by using PowerShell. So everything, practically everything, is done from the command line. It's described as Microsoft's first headless operating system, no GUI, no login locally. So if you're used to that name, that's what it means. You can't log into the machine locally. It's also considered Microsoft's most secure server deployment, all right? Because there's no GUI and you can't touch it unless you connect remotely via PowerShell. That makes it a very secure environment for installing your applications and services. All remote administration, as we said before, is done by means of PowerShell. In fact, I meant to do this earlier, but let me show you something very interesting about Nano Server. What you're looking at right now on your screen is a PowerShell script that's used to deploy Nano Server. All right, and just so you know, this is the only way to install and set up Nano Server. All right, what I'm doing right now via script. There is no setup tool. When you put your DVD in, your Windows Server DVD, and you start the installation process, you can, as in the past, choose to install the GUI version of Windows Server, the non-GUI version, Server Core if you want to, and that's it. There is no option to install Nano Server. Now there is a Nano Server WIM file on the DVD, but you have to extract it using a script that Microsoft gives you right here. New Nano Server VHD. They give you this script. You can download it from their TechNet website, and with the appropriate parameters, as you see there are quite a number of them, you can actually create a Nano Server. So that's what I'm doing right now. The process doesn't take too long depending upon how many packages you're adding. So what I just started a while ago will take between 8 and 10 minutes to complete. But notice that I can specify the name of the server, IP information, what packages are going to be installed, and this is the minimum, by the way, and where the resources are going to be, what resources it's going to be using, including a location for the Windows Server 2016 ISO image. All right, so you provide it with all of that information. So that's the one that's being built right now. Now, just in case something happens, I already built a Nano Server for us to play with later on. So this particular one, Nano Server 01, has already been built and is ready and waiting for us. But hopefully Nano Server 2 will finish by the time that we have gotten through this section right here. Notice that when I built my first Nano Server, the one that's up and running right now, that I included a number of different packages. Keep a mental note of this for those of you who will be doing this for your own purposes in the future, building your own Nano Servers. It is a very good idea to install all of your packages in the beginning when you do the initial setup. It is possible to add and remove packages after the fact, but it is not the easiest process in the world. So I learned that from experience. It's best to decide exactly from the beginning what you'll be using Nano Server for, install those packages from the beginning, and then you take it from there. But what it's doing right now, like I said before, this is the only way right now to install and set up Nano Server. One more bit of useful information. For those of you who've been reading older documentation about how to do this, I would recommend that you ignore anything that's older than 6 months. Windows Server 2016 was only released a few months ago, and some of the information from earlier this year and last year applied to the pre-release version, and Microsoft has already made changes to that. So even the script that was used to build Nano Server, that's no longer any good. So make sure that you're using up-to-date information, otherwise you might be a little bit frustrated by some of the changes that have been implemented. Now a little bit more about who will use Nano Server and when it might come in handy. If you work with applications that you needed to deploy in a secure environment, small applications that need to be very, very secure, that might need their own resources where nothing else runs on the server. As we mentioned before, Nano Server is going to be your best bet for that. Before, you would go with Server Core, but now Nano Server is even smaller. If you install Server Core, you're probably talking about a machine that's going to have about maybe about 10 gigs of drive space just for the operating system. Nano Server can be as small as 600-700 megabytes. All right, so this is a very small footprint server. You can run it with as little as 512 megabytes of RAM. So once again, very minimal resource usage. A couple of years ago, I worked with a medical application organization. They were building an application for monitoring patient status and information, and they were actually thinking about something like this. Particular device in order to get a certain result, and security was always an issue. But deploying it in on a small footprint server like Nano Server would be something that they would have done if Nano Server was available back then. All right, now let's go ahead and do a quick demo of Nano Server. We already started it, and as I said before, the reason I started the setup early was because this takes a few minutes. So this might actually need a few minutes more. So what I'm going to do in the meantime is show you the server that I've already set up. So there it is right there, Nano Server 01. Let's connect to it. For those of you who haven't seen it before, this is what Nano Server looks like. That's it. Not the prettiest baby in the world, but it gets the job done. Now we mentioned before that you can't log into the machine locally, and that's not actually 100% true. So let's go ahead and log in to the server to see what happens. All right, and we're in. And this is what we get. All right, you're very limited in terms of what you can do here. This is what Microsoft calls the Nano Server Recovery Console. If after you deploy the Nano Server, you've created the hard drive, the image, you need to make changes to your network settings, to your firewall rules, to your remote management settings, to the host settings. All of that can be changed from here. And pretty much that's it. All right, you can't do anything else. Well, besides restarting the server, shutting it down, basic things like that, that's all that you can do locally on the machine. Anything else that you want to do to this system must be done remotely using PowerShell. So let's get out of here and do that. All right. So what I'm going to do now is open up a PowerShell session. I've already have a console ready and waiting right here. And I want to connect to my remote Nano server, so I'm going to create a new session using, create a new PS session. And the name of the server is Nano Server 01. It's already a member of the domain, so I don't have to give it credentials. And there it is. I'm in. Whoops. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. There it is. I wanted to do that. There we go. Just make it a little bit bigger. So Those of you with not the best eyesight, you can see it a little bit better. So I've opened up a PS session to my Nano server. It's confirmed that I'm connected to it. And I can navigate the server. Anything that I would normally do with PowerShell, I can do here. All right. Yeah, so I'm just running a few PowerShell commands here just to demonstrate that I can actually work on the machine remotely. All right. So this is the only way to connect to and work with this server. Even the installation of applications must be done this way. All right. So that's why I work with my server. Here are a few key points to keep in mind. I already did this for this server, but for those of you who want to do this later on, make sure to check the documentation on Microsoft's TechNet website to learn about how to do this. Like we said before, there's not a lot of new information out there, but you want to make sure that the information you're working with is new. But what if you want to actually do this in a classroom environment and actually get some help doing it? Netcom has a couple of good courses that Microsoft created that you can use. Course number 20740, that's one of them, and 20743. Both of those courses allow you to work with and see how Nano Server works. So make a note of both of those. And let's see if, oops, my Nano Server build is done. Look, good. So we're almost there. Nope, not there yet. Good. That's okay. I'm glad that we built Nano Server 1 so that we could do that demo, even though this one isn't built yet. So let's go ahead and move on. And let's talk about another great new feature in Windows Server 2016. Those of you who work with other server environments like Linux, for example, might say that it's about time that Microsoft implemented this capability in their environment, but it's finally here. We can now create proper containers within a Windows Server 2016 environment. And just an additional note, this feature is also available for Windows 10 as well. So even on desktop computers, you can implement containers. For those of you who don't know what a container is, the concept is very simple. Normally, when you're working on an operating system, you run multiple applications and programs at the same time. And usually, that's not an issue. For very secure applications, however, or for applications that are very finicky, they require their own environment where there's nobody else in them. Some of you might have heard the term sandboxing in relation to this. The idea is that you put an application in an environment where nobody else can touch it. There's no other program running on the machine. It doesn't share file resources. It doesn't share registry resources. Everything belongs to it. And because it doesn't share anything, there won't be any compatibility issues or problems with malware or other programs interfering with what it does. So there are two different ways of doing this. The first way is demonstrated by these three applications right here. This is the usual way. You start up a system, and on it, you run an application. And before you run the application, you create a box, a container for it, where it has its own processes, access to the file system, and registry that belong exclusively to that application. They run concurrently on the same machine, but they are given their own resources so that they do not interfere with each other. All right? So there are some applications that simply require this level of isolation. And as we mentioned before, Nano Server is ideal for something like this, especially if you'll be implementing it with this layer of security. Did you notice the difference between this and what we just described a while ago? In a VM environment, not only are you giving the application exclusive access to processes, the file system, and the registry, but also to the operating system as well. All right. So for example, you might have a Nano Server image and you might put a single application on that image by itself. So it is totally isolated. Processes, file system, registry, operating system, nothing can interfere with that application while it is working. So of course you have better isolation and better security with this kind of configuration. All right. Now when you implement this kind of environment, your applications are not only protected, but they can also have additional advantages as well. For example, they become more portable. This level of isolation, especially if you do it in a single VM, means that you can move that application to any HyperV server. Once it's configured, once it's set up, you just move it wherever you want to. It's not stuck within that environment. And everything that it needs to work is taken along with it within that image. All right, so it becomes very portable. It's also easier to standardize your image as well. Once you create a container for an application, let's say you need to replicate it and you need 5,000 images. Well, that's kind of, let's say 10 images with exactly the same configuration. All right. The Docker application, which is what Microsoft uses to implement containers, allows you to actually duplicate the container and everything within it as many times as you want to get an identical configuration every single time. All right. So you standardize the image, it becomes portable, you can move it and copy it anywhere you want to. And you overcome compatibility issues, you overcome malware issues, sharing issues when you implement this kind of environment. Now, if you want to learn how to implement this in Windows Server 2016, remember this is brand new. This is the first time Microsoft is implementing this, just like Nano Server. The same two courses I mentioned before for Nano Server also will teach you how to implement containers as well. So let me give you those numbers again. Course number 20740A and 20743A. Both of those courses will teach you about containers, and they will actually have lab exercises where you get to actually work with this. But let's go ahead and show you how to do it. All right. How can I create containers within my environment? All right. So here I am back on my virtual server. I still have my connection to Nano Server. And let's make this bigger again so that you guys can see what I'm doing. Right. So I'm on a virtual server here running Windows Server 2016, but it has a interactive session connected to my Nano Server. All right. Now, as we said before, Nano Server is not Nano Server. Containers are implemented within a Windows environment by using Docker. All right. So the Docker application has already been configured on here. And one of the first things you want to do when you set this up is, of course, configure the appropriate firewall settings and download Docker images. Docker images basically allow you to create containers. Okay, what's going on here? Give me a second here. I might have to recreate my connection. Our Docker server seems to be acting up. All right, so let's recreate our connection. Oh, you know what? Hold on. Give me one quick second here. We're going to temporarily shut down our Nano server. I had temporarily reduced the memory setting on here so that I could do another demo later on. and I forgot to increase it. But no worries, Nano Server shuts down and starts up very quickly, as you'll see right here. Less than 10 seconds. Normally. There we go. That was quick. Good. So now let's reconnect to our server. There we go. Much better. And let's make sure that everybody can see that. There we go. All right. So what did I just do? I reconnected to my Nano server after making sure that it had enough memory for both Docker and HyperV, which I'll do a demo of a little bit later on as well. And I'm running Docker images to show you the images that are available on this server. So normally you'd be able to use each of these images as a container. So what this is telling me is that I have a container for Nano Server on this machine, which means that I can now run applications and run them within a Nano Server container. I also have a Windows Server Core container as well, although it wouldn't normally work on this environment, but I put it there as well just to show you that we could add additional ones. For those of you who work with Linux, Unix, there are containers available for them as well. So for example, Ubuntu. Microsoft seems to be having a really good relationship with Ubuntu for the past couple of years. There are containers available for that, so you can run containers within Nano Server for applications that need to run on Ubuntu. So there are my images. If I want to get a look at any containers that are currently running out there, there we go. We have a few of them that I ran last night and a couple of them from earlier today as well. So those are available. What if I wanted to create a new one? I want to create a container within which I'm running an application. How would I do that? The very simplest way to do that would be Docker run, all right? And then we give it the name of the container it's going to be using. So we're going to be using a Nano Server one, and then we give it the name of the application that is going to be running. Let's use something simple, CMD. There we go, right? So I have another one running right there. And that's just a very simple example that I wanted to show you very quickly. I could now take that container that I just created, configure it the way that I want, and then actually create multiple copies of it if I wanted to. So as we said before, it's very easy to work with, very portable. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but once you get used to the Docker command and what it can do, you can do a whole lot with containers, even on Nano Server. Remember, the main advantage of this is its small footprint. Remember, Nano Server is running on less than a gig, right? Less than a gig of space is needed to do everything that I'm showing you right here. So it's a very good resource for those isolated applications and services that need better security or need a small footprint server. Also, if you'll be setting up things like file servers, not file servers, but HyperV servers as well, on which you want to run containers, that's actually possible. In fact, this Nano server is actually running HyperV. And let me show you that as well. All right, so I'm still connected to my Nano server, right? And already have a virtual machine running on it. There it is right there. So HyperV is running on this Nano server. I've already set up a virtual machine, and this virtual machine is actually running Windows 10. And because both Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016 support containers, I could actually run a container within this image. All right? If I wanted to do so, I could actually set up that configuration if I wanted to. So Microsoft has given us a lot of new capabilities with the new container feature. All right. Now, HyperV has been around for quite a while. And Microsoft has decided to add additional improvements to it as well, and we'll do a demonstration of some of those in a little while. But first, let's talk about some of those improvements. One nice improvement is the ability to add and remove resources while your virtual machines are running. You don't have to shut down your VMs to add more memory, to add additional NIC cards, or to change your configuration. All of that can now be done. Microsoft has also added something called production checkpoints. Some of you might be familiar with the ability to save a virtual machine at a certain point in time. So for example, if my virtual machine is working perfectly right now, but then I'm going to be doing something to it later on which might break it, I can create a checkpoint right now to make sure that if I break it, I can roll back to that configuration. So we've always had that, right? How are production checkpoints different? Production checkpoints, as the name suggests, are added in to support an environment where you need to support workloads running on different machines. Quick example. I'm running SQL Server on one of my VMs, and I need to make sure that if I restore this server up to a certain point in time, additional servers can also be pushed back to that specific production time as well. So not only am I pushing back my SQL Server to 10:15 this morning, the other VM servers that run related applications need to also be pushed back to 10:15 a.m. as well. So production checkpoints have been implemented to make it easier for you to do that if necessary. Shielded virtual machines. All right. For virtual machines where you need additional support to protect against viruses and the prying eyes of administrators who should not be looking at information even when the server is in a saved state. That's what the shielded virtual machine state is. And basically what it means is that you're encrypting the information. So you're saving the virtual machine, even in its saved state, the information is encrypted and protected from even HyperV admins. Nested virtualization. You guys actually saw that a while ago. I was running a Nano Server virtual machine, and within that Nano Server virtual machine, I actually had HyperV running and another virtual machine running within that server. All right? So nested virtualization is now supported in Windows Server 2016. And I'm sure some of you are already thinking about how to take full advantage of that. I've already started playing with it, and I'm loving that feature in particular. That's well, I guess, yeah, that's my best new feature in HyperV 2016, the nested virtualization. All right. Now, to learn more about HyperV improvements, the additions to HyperV, if you want to actually practice this in a lab environment, course number 20740 is the one that you want to look at. All right. So you can make a note of that. 20740A is a course that you would use to learn more about the HyperV improvements. But let's go ahead and actually show them to you. And I think I mentioned this before, that a lot of the improvements for Windows Server 2016 apply also to Windows 10. Containers, HyperV, PowerShell Direct, all of those new capabilities we are talking about right now, you can see them working on Windows 10 as well. So my laptop is actually running Windows 10, but it has the latest build, so I can actually show this to you. So here I'm working with an image right here. It's up and running. And if I take a look at the settings, and most of you might be used to this, if I try to add a new NIC card to it, of course all of these options are not available to me. All right? So even with the new build, you can't do it with Generation 1 images. If, however, you have a Generation 2 image, like the SQL Server image right here, notice that I have the ability to add network cards even though the virtual machine is up and running. All right, so I can take full advantage of that if I want to. Also, memory. Notice that the memory option is not grayed out. I can modify the memory settings while the server is running. All right, and just to make sure I don't have any hiccups later on, I'm going to go ahead and shut down that machine. Right, to make sure it doesn't interfere with our Nano Server later on, one of our demos that we'll be doing. All right, so I can make modifications to my memory settings, to my network settings if I want to. Also, if I'm adding additional servers, and I can't do that on this one, but let's do that on here. Right, if I'm adding an additional HyperV server, for example, Nano Server 01, remember that's running HyperV, right? I can actually change the connection context as well and change the user. All right, so it doesn't have to be the same account as the one that I logged in with. It could be a different one if I wanted to. Okay, it should be running. Or maybe it turned it off. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I have some memory constraints on this machine, and that's why some of these resources the memory had to be reduced, and that's why I wasn't able to connect. But normally I would be able to connect remotely to my Nano Server 01 using additional or different credentials if I wanted to do so. All right, and you know what, let's try that because I really wanted to show you guys how I connected to the virtual machine. And where is it? Yeah, I tested all of this yesterday and this morning again, so I know it works. I think it's because I started that extra machine right there for the demo that was eating up resources. That's why some of this stuff had a hiccup. All right, good. There we go, that's better. All right. So my Nano Server, which is a virtual machine, remember it's running its own HyperV server, right? And within that HyperV server, I've already created an image. And I can actually connect to it, right? Now behave. Thinking about it. There we go. All right. So that, everyone, is the power of nested virtualization, running a VM inside of another VM. All right. So that's a really cool new feature that's been added to the new HyperV settings in Windows Server 2016. Hope you guys have as much fun with that as I'm having. Now, one more thing we're going to talk about before we let you guys go is PowerShell Direct. PowerShell, not new. It's been around for a really long time. PowerShell Direct, however, is a very powerful addition to that capability. For those of you who do not know, PowerShell is a command line scripting and command tool for managing pretty much anything Microsoft or anything running Windows or any of their applications. Right? You saw me use it a while ago to connect to the Nano Server remotely, which, as I said before, is the only way to connect to Nano Server. I can use it to create and manage HyperV virtual images, and I can also use it for my Docker related services as well. So PowerShell has been around and it's a powerful feature. The Direct in PowerShell Direct means that we are now capable of using PowerShell on a host machine to directly manage virtual machines. All right? And that is without reconfiguring any security settings. So I don't have to change the security settings on virtual machine 1 or any of the other virtual machines in order to use a PowerShell Direct. As long as it's there, and as long as I know the name of the virtual machine, from the host system I can connect to, and I can change the resources and copy information from and to that virtual machine. Now, this is going to make life a whole lot easier if you're an administrator that's managing a HyperV environment. Have you ever wanted to implement a single configuration change to all of your virtual machines or most of them at the same time? This makes it much easier to do so. There are other ways of doing that, of course, but the ability to do it with PowerShell directly, quickly, and easily is a really nice new option. And we're running out of time, so let's go ahead and do the demo for this one very quickly. Oh, and if anybody wants to learn more about PowerShell and PowerShell Direct, 2 courses to look at, which your Netcom rep can help you with, 20740A and 50331D. Both of those courses include detailed tutorials on PowerShell. All right. And here we go. All right, good. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just, let's make this a little bit bigger again so that everybody can see more clearly. Yeah, hopefully that makes it easier for you. All right, so here I am in PowerShell ISE, and I'm going to be connecting to my virtual machines. Right now, I'm working from the host system from Windows 10. And on my Windows 10 machine, of course, I'm running a bunch of different virtual machines. And let's take a look at those virtual machines very quickly. All right, so as you can see, I have a number of different virtual machines running on my system. All right, now what I'm going to be doing is using PowerShell Direct to manage those systems remotely. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my credentials variable to make life a little bit easier. And what I'm going to do now is connect to Nano Server 01. All right. There we go. So notice, enter PS session. Oh, where is it? Right. So I'm connected remotely to it. And notice that I'm doing this from my host system. All right. So the VM is running within its own VM environment, but from the host system, I've connected to my Nano server, and I could do this for any of my virtual machines. And as we said before, pretty much any command that you would normally run in PowerShell can be done from here. Let's end that session. All right. Now let's go ahead and do something a little bit more complex. Let's run a command on multiple virtual machines at the same time. I've picked 3 of them right here, Nano Server and 2 of my 50331 images. All right. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be deleting all script files from the temp directory on each of these virtual machines. All right. So if there are any script files on them in that directory, I'm going to be deleting them from all 3 of them at the same time with a single command. I'm sorry, the maximizer window is not going to work for this one. We have to scroll it down a little bit easier. Sorry if this isn't readable by most of you, but for the sake of time, we have to move a little bit faster. All right. And let's verify that that worked, that there are no script files. So I'm doing a check right now to make sure that there are no script files in the temp folder on any of these 3 virtual machines. So nothing showed up. What I'm going to do next is, remember I'm doing all of this from the host system, right? From my Windows 10 machine, I'm manipulating multiple virtual machines at the same time, all right, using PowerShell Direct. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a script file called testpd.ps1, and I'm going to put a single line in it, write output, this is a test. All right, and it looks like if it happened successfully. Let's verify though. We'll do a directory listing to make sure that the 3 files are there. And there they are. Each server now has a file called testpd.ps1 in the temp directory. All right? And I can execute it if I want to. So I'm going to execute this script on all 3 virtual machines at the same time. And of course the output is, this is a test. So that was successful. Pretty straightforward, right? All right, good. And I could run other PowerShell commands as well. We won't do that test right there for the sake of time. Let's move on. All right. What I wanted to show you before we close this session is that we can also move files back and forth between both machines. All right. So I'm going to create a new session right here. This one is going to connect only to the Nano Server. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy a file to the Nano Server from my local hard drive. All right. There we go. And we can verify that it is there. So I'm very easily, using PowerShell Direct, moving files back and forth between my PowerShell virtual machine and the host system. All right. And if I wanted to do this with multiple machines, I could do so by using a for each loop. All right. We won't do this part of the demo right now for the sake of time, but what I did up here would apply to only one virtual machine. But what if you wanted to do this to all of them or multiple virtual machines at the same time, run the same command on all of them using PowerShell Direct? You could use a for each command to accomplish something like that. Very quickly, all right? Let's just summarize some of the information that we've covered. All right? All of the new and updated features we've just taken a look at shows that Microsoft is very serious about implementing or making it easy for people that use their products to migrate to the cloud. If you want to create applications that run on a small footprint server, Nano Server is your best bet. If you want to run resources within containers to protect them, you can take advantage of containers, which uses the Docker capability. And all of those functionalities can be implemented within Microsoft Azure if you want to do that. Improved PowerShell capabilities means that it's now easier and faster for administrators to manage multiple resources at the same time from the host system without even touching or going directly to the virtual machines. For any and all of these reasons, you can take full advantage of your upgrades to Windows Server 2016. We mentioned a number of courses earlier on, and in a little while, Tracy is going to be giving you some information about how you can take advantage of some special offers from Netcom to take advantage of them. But which courses are going to be best for you? If you are new to Windows Server 2016, or new to the Windows Server environment, it's been a while since you've worked with it, course number 20740A might be the best one for you. All right, it will pretty much take you from, not from scratch, but if you know very little about Windows Server, that's the course to take. Now, what if you are very comfortable with Windows Server? Maybe you worked with Windows Server 2008 or Windows Server 2012, then you have a good starting point to work with. Go for course 20743A to skip out the beginner stuff. What if you want to improve your PowerShell skills? We mentioned course 50331D earlier, but course 10961A and also 55069 might also be useful for you as well. All of the courses that we just mentioned and the courses that Tracy are going to mention in a little while are SATV eligible. What does that mean? It means that your corporation might not even have to pay for the courses. Depending upon your relationship with Microsoft, what Microsoft products you purchase, some of these courses might actually be free to you. So definitely talk with your Netcom representative about that. And now it's time for our Q&A, so we need to turn things over to Tracy. Tracy?
Thank you so much, Neil. That was extremely informative, and we would like all our viewers out there to be aware that we do have that special promotion for the recommended courses for this webinar, which you can see up on your screen. You can enroll yourself for any of the courses mentioned on your screen and add 15% to your savings, and the offer is valid through December 31st, so do take advantage of that, like Neil was suggesting. And we do have a couple questions, so let's get to them, Neil. The first one is from Angel, who would like to know, what is the reason for giving an admin password to a server that can't do local login?
Good question. Keep in mind that you will still need to perform administrative functions on it remotely. The administrator login that I used in the recovery console, that's the same user account and password that you can use to log in remotely via PowerShell. So even though you can't do anything locally, you can still connect to it remotely using PowerShell, and you will need those administrator credentials in order to work with Docker, in order to work with HyperV, or any application that you install on it. It's still needed.
Okay, next question is from Dharmesh. Where do we learn PowerShell and what is its duration?
PowerShell has been around for a while now, and in order to learn more about it, Microsoft has a number of different courses. 3 in particular you want to pay attention to. Course 10961, 50331D, and 55069. Those 3 courses have a lot of labs where you use PowerShell and actually learn it and get used to it. So those are the 3 courses that I would recommend. Which one is best for you? I would recommend that you talk with your Netcom representative to find out which one you need to work with better. Also, Netcom is able to customize courses for you and merge them. So if you want to merge your PowerShell course with the Windows Server course, your Netcom rep can do that for you as well.
Okay, next question. Can you let us know, how does HyperV help? They don't seem to have a clear picture of it.
HyperV allows you to run multiple servers on the same machine. For example, all of the exercises that I did a while ago were all done from my Windows 10 computer. I didn't have to go back and forth between 10 different computers in order to do all of my demonstrations. But on my one machine, I was able to run Windows 10, I was able to run Windows Server 2016, I was able to run Nano Server, all within their own little boxes on my machine. That's what HyperV allows me to do. It allows me to create little virtual computers, each with their own memory space within which I can run individual resources on the same machine without having multiple physical computers.
And Neil, any other final thoughts before we end today's session?
No, I think we covered it. Well, one other thing I would mention is even though that you might have seen a lot of different things that you want to learn that might be from different courses, as I mentioned before, Netcom can do customizations for you. If you want to merge, for example, course 20743 with course 10961, that's doable. You can get specifically what you want from multiple courses with Netcom.
Great. Okay, so thank you so much, Neil Tucker, and thank you to all of you for joining us today. And if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. We hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Have a great day, everyone.